Welcome to the Expert Exchange. I'm Lindsay Melchak. There is a slow motion ambush happening in Canada's markets, and it's targeting the junior mining sector. A quiet rule changed in 2012 pulled the pin, and since then, short sellers have been unloading on small cap mining stocks with impunity. This isn't about market strategy anymore, it's about manipulation. And while regulators look the other way, billions in value are being siphoned from an industry that props up 700 plus Canadian jobs. Terry Lynch isn't having it anymore. He is the CEO of Power Nickel, the founder of Save Canadian Mining, and one of the loudest voices calling out this mess for what it is: legalized theft. The latest LinkedIn post that he put up pulled no punches, exposing everything from phantom shares to the broken rules that let predators gut small companies while hiding in plain sight. Terry, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining us.
Great to be here. Glad to get on and talk about this important topic.
Absolutely. Now, your piece on LinkedIn, as mentioned, was reposted and reposted and reposted. Your voice spoke up for the vast majority of an industry that has been bulldozed despite the greatest efforts. So I think where I want to start here is with the kill shot. I mean, firstly, maybe you can tell us about that rule and how it started. And, it was a 142-year-old rule, and it handed short sellers a loaded weapon. So let's start there for sure.
Yeah, I remember when they were talking about bringing it out in 2011. I was in the room back in Rural York in Toronto, and remember them talking about getting rid of the tick test. And I asked a question because I've always been an entrepreneur, raising money for my own deals and for others. And I said, well, how does this work? It doesn't make any sense that you need market support. Don't have unrelented, short selling, because these small, fragile companies, they need time to actually make progress, make a discovery, advance their marketing campaigns, whatever, create more sales. And the guy said, well, look at we've done this back testing on the Russell 3000. And I said, are you kidding me? The Russell 3000, the average size is 300 million. The average size on TSX is like 15 million or something, TSXV. It's like an order of magnitude difference. But, they didn't care at the time. And honestly, I didn't know at the time just how meaningful it was, right? I just knew it was wrong. I felt it was wrong just because, I feel like, small companies need to find their footing, and that the tick test helped us, in that respect. Now, as it turns out, as my understanding of the problem grew, the tick test, while I think is fundamentally important, one of the other areas that we discovered was probably even more important. Was we discovered that that this short market exempt clause somehow was given to certain market participants, but not all. So it's so ridiculous to me. Like in our country, in Canada, you can't discriminate for race, you can't discriminate for creed, you can't discriminate for sexual orientation, but you can discriminate for money. So how ridiculous, it's like our investments, our savings, if you or I, or if you're a regular pension fund or mutual fund, and you're just dealing normally, buying and selling in the market, you're not dealing pipe to pipe, you're not like an active day trader like these guys are, then you don't get this right either. So all of a sudden, a very small percentage, a fraction of probably 1% of the actual investors have this right that they can basically short any stock and be short market exempt. If you're a pipe to pipe with CIBC, TD, or Merrill Lynch, and you're a big hedge fund, you basically you have market maker exemption, which is insane. Like, honestly, nobody knew this. I found this out about 6-8 months ago. I was shocked when I learned it. I remember telling Eric Sprott this and Paul Beatty, like some, really prominent hedge fund guys, themselves. And they were like, no, I'm saying, yes, unfortunately. And like, they were surprised too. And it's like, it's shocking. It really is. And this is the smoking gun. There are other things that are wrong in the Canadian financial system, and ultimately we need to fix that too. But if we're going to do one thing to, restore the market to some semblance of normality, it would be shutting down the short market exempt. That is the head of the snake. We got to cut the head of the snake off.
So do you think this was a regulatory negligence or something even worse?
That's a great question. I honestly don't know. You know, I think back in the day when this was engineered, there were some very smart people that probably were thinking about how they could use this to their benefit. I think that regulators were complicit in it? I'm not that dark yet. I think the regulators have been played, and I think that, the regulators are, of course, it's tough to admit you're wrong. Okay. And even in our personal lives, we have that issue. So, hey, the regulators have been wrong on this. Okay. And somebody's got to admit that. Okay. And then it's like, as an entrepreneur, I'm wrong a lot. You know what I mean? We make mistakes all the time, but we got to face our mistakes and make corrections and somehow move on to promised ground. So I think with regulators, it's like, hey, you did the best you could with the decision data you had at the time. But the reality is you've been wrong on this issue, that you've allowed it to go on. And like, I don't really care about the history because we can't change history, can we? But we can change the present and the future. We need to change it now. It's like South Korea, man, those guys, they woke up. They saw what was happening over there and they banned short selling of all sorts. Okay. Everything across the board. They did it overnight. So these regulators that say, oh, we can't do that, we can't do this, that's bullshit. Let's just call it straight out what it is. That's lack of political will. But, the regulators, you know, they take their leadership from politicians. The politicians in this country are gutless. Okay. And I've been pussyfooting around with these guys for 3 or 4 years now. And I've been in the rooms with the premiers and with the ministers of finance and these sorts of things. And, they're smiling, cheering. Yeah, we hear you. We a lot of good points there. We want to do something. We want to fix this industry, but they've done nothing. Okay. And we're losing every day. And it's enough already, enough pushing the ball down the road. Wake the hell up. Stop this rule.
Well, let's talk about just your company alone. You uncovered 9 million fake shares in Power Metallic. That's not noise. That's coordinated sabotage at this point. So who benefits and why is no one stopping it then?
You know, we've developed, there's a company called Share Intel in the US that's an accounting firm, and they've developed a methodology, and they've used this, in a few lawsuits and stuff. And they are able to basically track share imbalances. So we posted our first share imbalance of 9 million, since more than tripled, by the way. And we've asked for responses. We're saying, okay, what it does is it shows that there's this many shares in the system over here, and there's this many cells over there. There's an imbalance. Like, okay, how is that imbalance being made up? We don't see in the short report. There's no massive shorting of power material in the short report. Is there some massive borrow that we're unaware of? We asked the investment banks involved to give us an explanation. Crickets. They don't respond. Okay. And FINRA and CIRO don't respond. They say, they basically, their political position is we don't respond to individual complaints, i.e. we don't believe in transparency. We'll sort of say, and they've by not responding, by not coming back to us, they're basically saying, well, we checked it out, it's all good. But those guys, honestly, if they checked it out, they did a very bad job, and they, and I'm a huge believer in transparency. Like when we're called to the carpet, we have to be transparent about everything we're doing. Why can't they be transparent too? Okay. I mean, it just makes no sense. Justice needs to be transparent. Okay. Because it's in these cracks. These guys are being played. Okay. Because they're going to have to admit they're wrong. And nobody likes to do that. And I get that at some personal level. But the system is dying. And if we don't wake up, I mean, we're seeing it already. More and more issuers are moving to Australia, and taking advantage of less restrictive rules there in terms of short selling. It's not perfect there, but it's better. And like, it's just like last year, the entire country of Canada raised only $20 billion. We used to routinely raise $100 billion, 20 billion. Half of it was in mining, thank God. But only the top 50 names got 70% of the love. So none of the smaller guys, pretty much, you have to have such a ridiculous discovery to get financed, and in the right area and in the right materials. It's super, super hard, and this should be our glory years, right? I mean, like we're commodities markets are in the top quartile. The world is talking about critical minerals like never before. Canada is uniquely blessed with a lot of these materials. We've got a lot of expertise in terms of finding them. We used to have a lot of expertise in terms of financing them. So, these things are we're now 10, 15 years into this deep down cycle. People keep saying, oh, it's a cyclical industry. It'll come back, with prices. That's bullshit. Okay. I don't believe that. Okay. We're seeing it. Look, gold is ripping its face off. Gold had never had such. Where are the junior miners in gold? Are they ripping their face off? No. You know why? Because investors are scared because every time they invest in the stock, it goes down.
Yep.
It doesn't matter. You make discoveries and it's like you don't get rewarded. You have to, it's insane how difficult it is to make the stocks go. And, you can't blame the investors because it's like, hey, they've been punished. I remember Eric Sprott, we were on an interview together and he says, look, investors aren't stupid. They get it. They'll go into real estate, they'll go into crypto, they'll do other things, and that's what they've done across the board. But, and of course, I think Rick Rule says it's a cure for low prices at low prices. And that is true to some extent. But, in our case, I think what it is, and maybe I'm talking, of the unseen voice that's out there saying, hey guys, we got to stop this. We got to change it now. As an industry, we got to come together. I think, hey, we got a minority government, they both federal leaders talked about supporting mining, by, regulatory reform, making it quicker to get the permits and stuff like that, which is of course important. And we need that. But the most significant thing that Prime Minister Carney should do really would be to fix the capital markets. And they will tell you it's not a federal jurisdiction, that it's a provincial jurisdiction. But national security is a federal jurisdiction. And I would tell you right now, we only have seen what President Trump is doing. I mean, he's trying to take advantage of a weakened Canada to take us over, which I don't think any Canadian wants. We love our American friends, and I personally like President Trump, but I'm not down for what he's talking about on Canada. I think that's crap. We've been great friends to those guys, and this is not how we should be treated. But we got here because we're weak. We got to get strong. We got to get our economy going. We got to get our ability to finance our growing companies has to be put back in place. And that means for now, start by getting rid of the short market exempt. Let's get back to having full transparency. How was it that, like our metallic trades in the TSXV, over half of our trades are not on the TSXV. And most of our investors don't know that. And it's the same for every junior security out there. What do we have 14 exchanges for here? Why do we not have one transparent tape? You know why? Because there's some expense involved in getting that. And I say, I don't give a crap about that. You guys should have thought that about when you put on 14 exchanges. You should have thought that out, because why are we being abused as investors? Why are our mutual funds and pension funds being abused? Because you guys don't want to fix the software. It's going to cost you tens of millions of dollars. I don't care. Fix it. We've got to be fair to the investors, and we'll get them back again. But until then, of course, here we are. So it's staggering, really.
It is 100%. I mean, this election that just happened, that was a pivotal election. And like you said, it is a minority government. They are for mining and helping all of that. So it's our responsibility now to hold them accountable for everything that they stood at that podium and they said they were going to do. So thank you for saying that. I want to actually take a moment and see if you can actually explain to the people what naked short selling really is, because it sounds like a finance term, but what you're describing with all of it, it sounds more like counterfeiting stock. So why isn't that a crime with consequences?
Yeah, naked short selling is something I feel like that buzzword was created by the bad guys, because naked short selling, it sounds like something we don't want to talk about on public TV. But it's really simple. Think of it. You own all of us have owned a car or a truck at one point in our life, and we've had our car permit. Okay. So if you took that truck or car and you sold it to your friend or to somebody you met on Kijiji or something, and you sign over the permit, okay, that's the trade. Now, what would happen if you photocopy that permit 10 times, you sold it to 10 guys? If you sold that, that'd be fraud or theft. You go to jail. Okay. It's pretty black and white. Well, that happens every day in the stock market. Okay. So, they actually are they're counterfeit shares. They basically, what happens on the short market exempt is these hedge funds will hit the bid. Because they're short market exempt, they don't have to write on the ticket that it's short, so it goes through as if it's a regular trade, and we think it's a regular trade, and then it doesn't get delivered in time, right? Because there's a failure to deliver, and you can look through the stats. Stats of failures to deliver are over 10%. And you think about this market, that's mammoth. And then it gets one worse, because what happens ultimately is eventually and it could be a month, it could be 2 months. They're supposed to settle a trade now. I think it's one day. It was 3, and it was 2, and then I believe it's now 1. But this can go on for some time, and with these people, and eventually what happens is it gets flipped offshore to outside of Canada or the United States. And both FINRA and CIRO, our national regulators, have said once it goes outside our system, we lose track of it. So it's a serious issue, and it's mind numbing. Now, on the naked short selling side of things, I'm not convinced it's even illegal in Canada because of the way the rules are. Spoofing, which is a whole other problem, is illegal, and there's plenty of that, and we've got evidence of that as well. But naked short selling should be illegal. I don't believe by definition, as far as I understand it, it is illegal. That should be the easiest thing for them to do. But I mean, if you have a short market exempt, you're not really short selling. If you're exempt, you're exempt. So we got to stop this exemption stuff. That's just like, hello, and we just gave a submission into CIRO on that stake in mining did about a month ago or so, through some great work from Dave Luton and Dave Lauer, pardon me, and his team, and made a really, I think, a tremendous submission that, and we'll see. And they're saying, oh, we'll get back in 6 months. And I'm like, South Korea changes things in 5 days. They shut down the whole system, and they put bankers in jail and massive fines. And for Canada, it's like, let's do it in 6 months. And let's like Rome is burning. It's practically burned to the ground. Like, what do we have to do to get you guys to do something? I don't know, So I do know what we have to do is we have to make more noise like we're doing today. Hopefully we'll get this out there. And safety mining, we're raising $250,000 right now to kickstart. I'm trying to bring a new team in because I'm so busy with Power Metallic. I obviously don't have the time to devote to the issue as much as I'd like to. But obviously, I've got my primary job is to, grow Power Metallic, and we've been blessed with this amazing deposit, or resource, or mineralized zone. I got to get my 43-101 terms correct, or get my wrist slapped. But the safety mining initiative is so important because we need to have somebody agitating for us. And the mining sector, and of course, the mining sector is not the only one being crucified by this.
Right.
We know biotech and oil and gas and basically technology of all sorts, all small caps are getting abused. It just so happened we started in mining, but it's an equity problem across the board, and we need to fix it across the board. And that would be our objective, is to do that. But we need to get, continue to agitate and to bring much more exposure to this issue, and basically make it so that politicians have to change. They really, and it's like Canada's economy is shaky at best. The great thing about mining is that here we got, the world needs our critical minerals like never before, and all of our resources, and we should be doing everything we can in our power to get these up and running, creating really high-paying jobs, generally in northern communities, and like 10% of the mining workforce is First Nations. We're trying to build bridges with these people. They're the guys that are being punished, and it's like, there's so many positive things I can say about mining and what it does for communities and for the workers, and even for the environment, because of what we do, pro-environmentally. There's so many great things, but we got to fix the capital markets. The government programs, as much as we like to point fingers at the government on many bad things, they develop some good critical mineral policies. So I don't feel like the government's incentive-wise can do a whole lot more. They've done a lot, but they can fix and must fix the capital markets, because free enterprise still has to drive the boat, and we've broken that in Canada, and it's almost irreparable. But we need to jump on that ASAP.
So, how does a junior miner even stand a chance when they're being ambushed by spoofing and phantom shares and regulatory apathy? I mean, what's the real world impact on exploration and development then?
Well, you just have to look at the math, right? The exploration spending is down, TSX fees trading at or near its all-time low, even despite a robust, commodity market and a roaring gold market. So ordinarily at this point in a cycle, we'd be triple where we're at, I expect, so it's tough. It's not easy. You have to be, enormously lucky with the resource discovery. You have to have some capital of your own. You have to have friends with capital. And Power Metallic was lucky in that ours was a critical mineral like copper and nickel and PGEs and in Cusbury and Quebec, the 2-for-1s were available on the flow through and stuff like that. So we were able to advance the project, 3 million at a time until such point as we were able to prove that the resource was super exciting. And then we got some national guys like, Robert Friedman, Rob McEwen, and Gina Reinhardt, and all these people came in, and so that became meaningful. But there's I look, and you probably know this better than most, since that's your job to interview many of these CEOs. There's a lot of great gold deposits in Canada, millions of ounces,
Yes.
and it's like ordinarily that should be trading 10 times the price,
One,
you know?
yeah.
But and they should be getting financed, and they should be advancing those towards production and creating value and jobs. And we're not, because, generally, you invest in these deals and they might have a momentum at the start, and then they just get sewered by these relentless selling because these guys have enormous capital power, very tough to beat, we got to balance the playing fields here. I hear a lot of people, and people that are, I think, don't really know. People don't believe me when I tell them about the short selling. And even when I show them the data, they're like, they just struggle to believe that it can't possibly be like that.
Yeah.
But it is, unfortunately. And it's like, it is a serious problem. It's sort of, it's not even like, sometimes I wonder if talking about it is a good thing for my Power Metallic shareholders, because at the end of the day, my mission really is to grow Power Metallic and to create value for my shareholders. But I just feel like this thing is just so endemic in the whole system that it's got to be stopped. And like we're at least well financed, and we can sort of speak a little bit to it without we don't we'll ultimately be our future will be decided by the drill bit, which is what it should always be.
Yeah.
The drill bit should decide it always, but and good deposits should get rewarded with more resources to see how big it can be and how profitable it could be put into a mine. That's how we used to grow things here in Canada. And if we can get back to that, we'll have a lot of discoveries and create a lot of wealth. And I think the country could use that right now.
1,000,000% couldn't agree with you more. You've got three clear demands, though. I mean, you want to bring back the tick test, you want to ban naked shorts altogether, and you want to force the damn rules. So, what's the holdup? And, how do we put pressure where it counts?
Yes, so that's the trick, isn't it? So I sort of we tried lobbying. We tried like going to the ministers and to their staff and educating, providing data. There's no point in talking to the regulators. They basically, I was asked what I would do in Ontario if I was premier for a day. And what I said is I would go down to the OSC and speak to whoever the CEO is there. And I'd say, hey, Mr. or Mrs. Smith, I honestly don't know who the head of the OSC is. No disrespect intended. Is I'd say, we need to shut down the short market exempt. Okay. We need to shut it down. I want a plan to shut it down in the next 5 days. Okay. And to show you how serious I am about this is that if you don't commit to me tomorrow to have a plan, then I'm going to fire you and we're going to bring out the next guy. And we're just going to keep on going down the line until we get somebody to give me the answer I want, is we're shutting it down.
Yeah.
Because if the regulators will fight this because they're admitting their mistake. They don't want to admit their mistake. And they're also, at the end of the day, the banks are the really bigger issue here. Because the banks basically run the country, really, from a financial perspective. And they're obviously, unfortunately, I think the comp structures in the banks, they're short-term thinking. They like the Globe and Mail put out a thing, back in the last year or so, showing $100 billion has come out of the Canadian capital markets. Well, 90 billion of that, 90% of that would be with the banks, because that's how it works in our country. 90% of all financial assets are with the banks. So imagine the fees that they'd be losing by not having that 90 billion there. Mammoth, right? But in the short term right now, they're prop trading and prop lending to these hedge funds, etc. They're making a lot of money. So short-term obsession is making the banks not want to rock the boats. And the politicians don't want to rock the banks because the banks fund all their things, the campaigns, etc. So it's like, guys, we're killing the country. You're killing, there's nothing left. We only raised $20 billion last year. If that doesn't wake you up as to there's a big problem here, I don't know what will, and it's like, yeah, you got to, maybe there's a short-term pain for the banks in this changing it, but take the short-term pain because it's going to make the patient recover and get healthy again. And you're going to make a lot more in the long term. Like there's almost, who'll be quickest to start to invest inside? The same guys that are shorting are going to get on the long side of this game once we change those rules, because they are the smartest guys on the planet. I'll tell you one thing about those short selling guys. They are not stupid people. They're super sharp. The stuff they do, I'm just like, man, there's no way you can compete against these guys. They're razor sharp.
Yeah.
But by being razor sharp, if you change the rules, they realize, hey, the money's going to be made on the long side now, and they'll all pile back in. And so I think the message, because I never want to be like a doom and gloomer. I'm not a doom and gloomer. I personally believe that we can achieve great things. Is that, hey, and Rick rules the cure for low prices, low prices. Yeah, it's a great time to be finding those great deposits that are trading for 10 cents on the dollar that you really believe have the goods, and buy them and hold them, because they will turn. And I was listening to something Rick was saying about uranium. He said he was in uranium 3 years early, but the 5 names that were in uranium, the smallest gain was 22 times. So you waited 3 years, but the smallest gain was 22 times. If you had to wait 3 years to make 22 times, I'm telling you, that would be a great trade. I'm not saying that, but I think there is tremendous opportunity in the space. And if we can sort out this rule, the short market exempt, and get rid of that, the space can heal very quickly.
So,
And the returns could be enormous for our investors, for our communities, and for our country. So I just, it's mind blogging, to me that we haven't, done that, and despite, but it's just, it's the nature of politics to, people don't like to admit they're wrong. People don't like to rock the status quo, and change is difficult. But look at this. We're now having, the U.S. talking about taking it's over. If we're not going to wake up now, when are we going to wake up? So now, Prime Minister Carney, he's got an opportunity, and he needs to take this opportunity to be the leader the country needs and to make these changes. It's in his jurisdiction because, this is a national security threat, and he needs to get together with the premiers and say, hey, guys, we need to change this rule. It's in your purview, but it's a national security issue. We must do it now.
Yeah.
And that's it. And make it happen. And why not? Because it's the low-lying fruit for him. It can make him look really good right out of the gate, and that would be a great thing for him. He runs a minority government. Eventually, he'll want to run a majority company. This will be the way he gets there.
He came pretty close this time. Terry, this fight goes way beyond one stock or one company. This is about whether Canada wants to actually stay in the mining game or, ultimately surrender it to manipulation. So thank you again for taking the gloves off and giving people the truth. It's so appreciated.
Yeah, well, let's hope that somebody's listening and they actually do something. I mean, that's the thing. But I think that we're going to continue at Save Canadian Mining to bring the fight. We're gonna try and get this fundraising organized to bring our new team on. If anybody wants to help Save Canadian Mining, if there's any CEOs of mining companies out there that want to participate in this, Power Metallic gave $25,000. We're asking for small companies to do, what they can, 1,000, 5,000, whatever you think you can do in cash. It could be in stock. We're a believer in the junior mining, but we need to put together a bit of a pool to get this team on. And then, we'll be, I tend to be working with, I just joined the board of PDAC. I tend to be asking PDAC to do a lot more on this issue than they have been doing in the past. And I hope to be able to convince the board to participate heavily in this, because there's no bigger fight in our industry today than this.
Well, we're calling out all of you CEOs. Get in touch with us. Get in touch with Terry. Let's make this happen for sure. We need to come together for sure. Thank you for being the voice for all of this. And we hope to continue this conversation for many years to come.
Thanks for having me on. Appreciate you. Take care.
For more raw, unfiltered insights, stay right here on stockhouse.com. And to learn more about Power Metallic, head to their website at powermetallic.com. I'm Lindsay Melchuk with Stockhouse Publishing. Thank you for watching.